Well, hi and good morning, everyone. Welcome to Startup Talk 39. We're going to talk about how you can attract talent to your startup. We're still waiting for people to join the talk, so I'll just start with a short introduction to the Academy, and then we'll dive into the presentations right away. So I'll just share my screen with everyone so we can talk a little bit more. Okay. So for today's talk, we're going to be zooming in on how you can attract talent to your startup. First, I'm going to tell a little bit about what we do here at the Academy, what we're trying to aim for with these talks. I'm going to give you a brief introduction also to what's up to come next in our pipeline, and we'll talk about today's topic, what you can expect from today's session. Really briefly about the Academy, we've been running for years now. We have a ton of different resources available for startups, aiming at tech startups, of course. We sort of strive to break through this anecdotal ceiling of the success stories. So we really want to get hands-on, tactical to help new tech founders solve the most urgent pains. Starting a company is a pretty damn tough job, not to mention if you want to get your hands onto that lovely hockey stick curve. So at the Academy, we get the real life founders and also the experts to come on stage, dish out their experience, both the good and the bad ones, and also share their expertise to help you, the new soon-to-be founders, solve your most urgent pains. We're going to keep it short. We're going to keep it very effective. As I said, it's going to be very bone and flesh. It's the launch pad so that we can kind of dive into some of the tactics when we get to the Q&A later on. Just to clarify the logic behind the PSV Academy talks. So instead of having 10 steps from A to B, we have sort of the different building blocks. And we try to cover the different stages, or not the stages, but the phases of the early stage startup. So covering the different building blocks, but also sort of trying to take them as, the most relevant in the current climate. Just to give you a context for today's talk, when we talk about talent, when we talk about people, we've already covered quite a lot of the different elements to this topic. We've talked about scaling a distributed product team, how to incentivize your teams, working with culture versus equity. We've also talked about diversity. So just to give you an idea of what we're not really covering today, we're going to zoom in on the talent acquisition part. But of course, if you want to know more, if you want to dive into other aspects, we have a lot of other resources on our website. Next up in the pipeline, we have our open door session. You get 30 minutes of feedback. It started out being the investors. Now it's actually the whole crazy bunch you can talk to. We have financial, legal, people specialists, and so forth. Also, new concept coming up, we have leading from the boardroom. It's our call to action to promote and also push the agenda towards diversity. You get to talk with 4 of our investors on the first conversation. You get to pick their brains and also learn from their personal experience. Also, going back to the physical stage this summer, or in April actually, we have a social event coming up. So meet us, meet the other founders, meet the community behind these talks, get some PSV beers, and be inspired on the online stage. Before we get to that, we're going to have today's session, just short how, what we're going to dive into, what to expect from today's session. We're going to dive into how you can attract talent to your startup. We often hear from startups, how to even get talent to the team, but also how to get the right people that we can make sure that we're scaling rapidly without going off the rails. It's quite a complex matter, and there's no silver lining to this, but we're going to try to dive into a sort of here and now setting, taking the most urgent pains, but also taking it, what's the next step? What do you need to prepare for to be ready for your Series A or seed funding? So really quick, we have Frederick coming with us from a new startup Lifeline, but also the former head of people and culture at the Danish skincare brand Nøje. He's going to talk about sort of the talent acquisition toolbox in the very early days. Then we're going to shift gears a little bit. We're going to flex the muscles. How do you get the right people for your team? And also, how do you build sort of the talent acquisition for scale? We have Travis Ausley coming from Lunar, which has also hit milestone funding round. So it'll be exciting to get his point of view as well. Most importantly, The presentations are, of course, a launchpad for the Q&A. We really want to know what you want to get the answers to. Ask the experts directly, and just make sure that you can type in your Q&A questions as we go. We'll incorporate them, and then when we open up the doors for the conversation, we'll sort of get the ball rolling fast. Really quickly, the final note for my part, we're going to send out an NPS survey right after the event. So please make sure to share your feedback with us. It's very much appreciated. So that's it for me. I think now it's time to get Frederick on the stage to share your presentation.
Sure. Hi all. I'll just figure it out how to share the screen a second. I'll have it right here. We are. Share and we're good. Perfect. So hi, I'm Frederick, the co-founder of Lifeline, and I'm going to share my 7 key points on how to build a talent acquisition function from scratch to attract the best possible talents for your startup. I'm 39 years old, have a wife, 2 kids, and is a passionate hobby chef. As I mentioned, co-founder of Lifeline. We just started last month, and we're on a mission to improve the state of mental health enabled by tech. Basically, we're looking into AI-enabled coaching. My latest endeavor was with Neu as head of people and culture, where I was employed as employee number 12 and part of growing the company over a year's time to become around 55 employees. So a pretty hectic journey and an amazing journey. I stopped there in January, so it's quite recent. I'm basically born and raised in people and culture, or human resources, as I would call it at that point. My mom had a consultancy at the attic at my childhood home, so I'm really grown up with it. I have a master in administration and human resources as well. So that's just so you know who you're hearing the stories from. I want to kick it off with a little thought experiment, just to get the thoughts going around talent acquisition and what works and what doesn't. So please all imagine that you are the CMO at a scale-up and you are launching a campaign with a budget of 600,000. And how would you go about it? There's many ways to do it. There's lots of info missing right here, but basically there's something a bit slow and I'm trying to... Here we are. No. I'll just try to see if I can take this. There we are. Now imagine that this was your campaign. This is pretty much the truth when you're looking at recruitment. Job ads is the #1 go-to solution for all campaigns that you would call it in marketing. A budget of 600,000 would be equal to a salary of 50,000 per month for an employee, divided over a year, of course. And this is just a random job ad from the hub. It's not to be picky about the job ad or the hub, but there's just room for improvement. And it's a way of working that's been standing still for ages. Basically, we took the job ads that we were used to seeing in the papers, put them online and thereby digitalizing it, but we're still working in the same ways when it comes to attracting people. And there's so much room for improvement. So one of my key points is that the recruitment is broken. Think outside the box, use your logics, because there's so much more interesting way to do these things. Good. Basically just recruitment one-on-one, how to win. It's the push and the pull. There's a spray and pray. That's the job advertising, your campaigns, your job posting. You put something out there, you hope that people come in. And then there's the push, the outreach, where you directly contact candidates, the headhunting or the sourcing or the searching or whatever you want to call it. Both is effective ways of working, and to me, it should always be a mix of the two. But that's basically the instruments that you have, and your ways to win or to beat the market is basically the numbers game. You can do more outreach, get in touch with more candidates than the other ones, and thereby hope to land the best one, or you can try to improve conversions, aka building a compelling offer. And the numbers game is easy. It's just turning up the knot, doing more of what you do. It does work. It does have effect, but it can be very costly, and it's not the best way in the long game. But it can give you kind of quick results. Improving conversions, which I will focus on here, is the long game. There's no silver bullet for it. It won't give you results this month, but it's something that you will build up and see improvements over time. My 7 key points. First one, recruitment is core business at growth. So please treat it like that. One of the things that I most rapidly see is that it's always putting out fires in recruitment. It's always month to month thinking. But once you start building a kind of bigger logic and more long-term perspective around it, you'll see great effects on the long term. So first point is treat it as you would do with sales. If you're good at it, it's the same psychological mechanisms that you're working with. It's the same thing that makes a person buy from you, that makes a person take a job from you, or at least the same kind of convincing mechanisms. So I would definitely think about these things, or sales or marketing for that sake. Have a clear hiring plan so that you are able to act proactively and can calculate employee turnover, mishire, and promotions. One of the hardest things in a talent acquisition function is if you don't have a longer term and you don't know the talents that you will be looking for in the long run. Because one of the things that you'll see is that talent is always around, and you need to establish these relations in good times. It's not favorable for the talent to have to act in the same week as you kind of get in touch with them. It would be nice to build these relations over time, so you can act more proactively if you have a clear plan. Communicate the importance of the hiring and don't hesitate to put a value on it, so that you and your colleagues act accordingly. Late hiring is one of the key points to missing your targets. And you can actually put a kind of direct value to it. How does it affect you if you don't get your developer in time? How will it affect you if you don't get the salesperson in time? It does have clear effects on how you deliver the results that you're aiming for. At the same time, the team that you have on board is also kind of, it has direct effect to your ability to attract funding and your valuation. So it is core business and it is core matters. Hire people and culture early. It's one of the, to me, there's like 3 positions that you always hire too late. It's people and culture, it's your EA, and it's your chief of staff. But today, let's focus on the people and culture. Get them in early. I was in as number 12 because we eyed the Series A funding and knew that we were about to scale, but it was really nice to have a couple of months to kind of prepare for the scaling and work proactively. What I see most commonly is that you hire the people and culture person around when you're around 30 or 50 employees, and you're basically spending the first period and most time putting out fires because you have taken some hits on the culture and you're just trying to prepare. So being able to act proactively in that function is really something that can get you a long way. And don't compromise on quality. And with this, I mean on the hiring part. You might be busy, you might be in a hurry and all these things, but you tend to stick with your employees for quite a while afterwards. So it can be really expensive to compromise on the hire just due to closing it within the month. So I would always aim for the right, for as possible, the right hires. Yeah. Secondly, there's something when I'm trying to shift my, go to the next slide that keeps, there we are. Get your story straight. And that's an important one. Culture equals brand. That's the short story about it. That was my first assignment when joining Noi, thinking around what's our employer brand, what's our value going to be, and how will this affect our culture. So and one of the most important factors and one of the key points to success at that point was that it was a close collaboration with brand. So we didn't just look internal, but also took the external part of it. So we were really able to kind of walk and talk the talk. Building your narrative, there's like a things that I would point at. Who do you strive to be? That's the first one. What's your vision? Who do you try to impact? What's the purpose that you're working with? Who do you want to become, basically? Then looking into what's unique about your business model. At Noi, we had some really nice things. We were building on feedback. It's the data model in the market that enabled us to build the best customized cream solutions. Of course, feedback would be one of our core values at the culture point as well. Same thing goes with diversity. Working with customization, we were able to build the product for the specific needs of the user. Thereby, diversity was an important factor, so something that we wanted to level internally as well. Then, how are you perceived? Interviewing employees, your customers, your current customers, your key stakeholders, your wished for employees, what are they looking for, and the customers that hasn't started with you yet, to really figure out who you are to them and how that matches with who you want to be. And then align brand and commercial with the employer brand, so you're sure that you're kind of speaking with the same tongue. That is also what your employees are experiencing and living. Test it. Is it competing to your talents? and hereby I mean the talents that are relevant to you, not all. That's an important factor. Don't try to be something for everyone, but try to be something for the ones that are relevant to you, and then yell it to the world. Make sure that you communicate it as much as possible, and keep telling the story in whatever touch point you have. Number 3, I call it everyone and always hiring. Engaged employees and candidates are your number 1 source of new talent. And I think we tend to kind of skip that point, or at least that's one of the areas where I've been able to build most quick value in some of the organizations that I've been part of, especially, for instance, tech resources. The last person they want to talk to is a talent acquisition person, but the one they want to talk to is the person that they're going to work side to side with on the development projects. They want to hear it from your developers. And as much as you can engage them and their network in your recruitment efforts, the better the results and the more authenticity you'll be able to speak with. Make sure that that your employees understand that being able to create fellowship, attract people, and engage with the outside world is also part of good performance. Especially leaders should be measured on the ability to attract employees, and I've seen it several times. There are leaders coming in that people are just following them into the door, and you'll have a bunch of great new people, and then the ones where you can't really attract anyone to the team. We can only do so much from talent acquisition, so you really need to get the employees on board on these things. Same thing goes with the candidates. If you have them engaged, they are really able to kind of spread the words and get more people engaged. Think about talks, SoMe, networks, meetups, all these things. Working out loud, share the message. It does make a difference if you're really communicating with your market. People want to follow, and you don't kind of convert the first time you see a job ad from you. But if you see the job ad after having heard several of great stories and stuff about what you're working on, there'll be a higher possibility for people to really jump on board. Share as many jobs as possible, as many places, and as early as possible. I've seen many kind of, especially with the senior hires, that you kind of want to go below the radar and these things and only level the network. And it can be good to work with kind of exclusivity and reach out to kind of your primary network. But I would always share these stories. Posting jobs is also a story of success. It has also commercial value, but it's also just get the message out there. Don't wait for the month that you want to hire the person. You can just as easy promote it half a year earlier and just write in it that you are looking for people to start at a later point. But really get that message and get the network going. And then treat people nice. One negative experience has ripple effects. And that's, of course, when you're letting people go, but also during the hiring process and in total, how people are received when they come to your office or wherever you meet them. One negative story has ripple effects. This has been one of my focus area throughout my work with talent acquisition, but there will still be plenty around that would be able to tell stories where I haven't treated them in a way that they felt nice about. And I've heard those stories and they come back and they'll be told again and again. So it's really something to focus on because it has ripple effects, these things. And you are in a position of power when you are the one offering a job. Good. Build your talent ecosystem and level tech and automate for scale. That's just, there we are. I would just think about these things early. The first system we got in the people and culture function was an ATS system, a recruitment system, of course, to do nice job ads. But my key point of attention was to be able to tell a story in a nice way and to kind of engage with candidates and make sure that we had a way of connecting with them, keeping track of them, and communicating with them. Talent acquisition is heavy on admin, and there's plenty of chance to get buried in it, but really think about how to level tech in order to automate and work more cleverly, because otherwise you'll be behind the game all the time. One thing is also when you look at most kind of career sites out there, the only way for people to really engage with you if there's a specific job that they want to apply for and shift job within that month. We don't have that many ways of engaging with people that could be relevant or interested at a later point. I will definitely look into how to build those longer relationships also from a tech perspective. Do email automation and these things to keep people engaged. and make sure that you don't just communicate with your candidates when it's about a specific job at a specific timing. You can tell stories about way more than that, and do also remember that there's a commercial value in these things as well. So yeah, keep an open mind for that. Good. Diversity and inclusion, that was an eye-opener for me at Neu, how much value that brought, really focusing on that at an early point. It's of course feels nice to be focusing on and be doing good at these things, but the kind of business effect of this is also amazing. It's for perspective, innovation, culture, and performance. It's not just gender, and I think that's an important factor to it. It's one of the things that we kind of focus on quite early, but there's so many other ways to think about diversity, and they all play a role. For instance, and that's been a direct experience, but it's not easy to attract your first international senior hires if you're a bunch of white young Danish boys. They will feel like the odd one out. So the earlier you can kind of create an international and open environment, the easier it will be for you to also attract these senior international people along the way. Inclusion, that's in diversity and inclusion is the overlooked factor, I think. That's the part about, do we really want to play together? So we might be open to all sorts, but do we also kind of engage when we are here? And if you are in a situation where we were kind of had 20 or 30 or 40 people when we kind of employed 10 per month, you really need to have an employee staff that is open and embracing new people and welcoming them in a good way. That's so important for the onboarding process and basically to get people up to speed faster. So having an inclusive culture is just key. And if you don't, you'll miss out on talent. If you're too narrow in your perspectives and only looking the places that all others are, you'll miss out on the good talent. Good. This one is really close to my heart. Being good at hiring equals good at firing. Being good at firing might be one of the most overlooked factors in people and culture, and to me, one of the most important. I'm a bit of a historic in mind, and in a life philosophy belief that really being able to appreciate life, you need to kind of accept and acknowledge the part about death. That's where you kind of understand these things in a good way. And the way that I build everything in talent acquisition and people and culture, I always look at what's the ending point of this. Where's the death in what we're doing? If we're doing a talent program, how do we look into when is it ending? With hiring, there is a good chance that you have to let quite a few people go. Research showed that the predictability, the highest predictability that you can reach in a hiring process, assessment-wise, is 40%. That's not a lot. And that's the optimal assessment. That's not what we're doing most times. So basically just expect mishires and make sure that you have processes in place so that you know how to handle it in a good way. And we're back to the treating people nice and all these things. It has ripple effects. By the way, in that research, the optimal assessment is a combination of a cognitive intelligence test, a value and ethic test. It's something that is included in some of the personalities tests out there, and then a structured interview. And a structured interview basically meaning asking all candidates about the same questions. This has never been my preferred way of assessing people, but I've always inspired by it and take points from it. Good. Letting people go, and a way to be good at that. First thing, I think the most important rule is it may never come as a surprise. That's not an easy one to live up to, because it's never easy to have these conversations, especially when you're not taking them, but it may never come as a surprise, and there should be something leading up to it. Build a process to have communication before having to let people go. Make sure that you have stuff in line. So before you have the real issues and problems employee-wise, you have communication so that you're able to kind of communicate these things in a good way, let people know that we're heading in a wrong way, there's stuff that needs to be improved, how can I act better as a manager, and all these things. But make sure that you have process so you kind of catch up on these things in the beginning. Communicate reasoning and process as open as possible. Again, the ripple effects, it's hard for a employee staff to see people being let go, people that you enjoy working with and all these things. So make sure that it's all right to talk about it and have open communication about these things, and don't be cheap. You're in a position of power again when you have the job that you're taking back. Make sure that you're not cheap in that process. You can't buy your way for a bad process or a bad experience, but you can make sure that money is not a factor to be blamed of afterwards. Good. And just, I think that's when you're sitting in this situation and considering these things, just want to point out, not letting people go is not the nice thing to do either. In a psychological safe environment, which is key to having a great performance environment, is also an environment where you are able to have these hard communications. So not letting people go is not the nice thing to do either. Good. Deluding or evolving culture, that's a typical one, and almost kind of something that you take for given when you are scaling an organization, that you will be deluding culture. Culture is always evolving. It's the sum of our people and some that defines the culture. And as you bring more people on, your culture will evolve. And if you feel that it's deluding, it's probably you that needs to unlearn that you're stuck in the old ways. I think it's one of the most challenging parts, especially as a founder, but also being some of the first on board in a startup, is that the game changes so fast. So what gave you good performance last month won't be the same thing the next month. You're taking in venture capital with your venture capital startup, basically meaning that you're taking in money to grow faster than what you would do organically. And that does also mean that your people won't be able to keep track with it unless you're really good at leading the way and showing the ways that it's evolving. Camilla, please let me know if I'm out of time, but yeah. I've
2 minutes to go.
2 minutes, perfect, thanks. I have this. Basically, there's a framework called competing values that I love talking about and taking into consideration in these things. I've kind of done a merge with it, so it fits a startup journey. We're starting in the upper left corner with the ideation phase. Then we're moving on to test, scale, improve, is where you basically are starting to prepare for an IPO or exit or whatever you want to go for. What's interesting is that you can basically look at the orientation in your startup and how it affects the values and the culture and what defines good leadership and ways of organizing. And it's an extremely difficult or big shift. If you, for instance, what is kind of the key in this framework is that it's opposite values. So if you're looking at what is a good leader, what's a good culture and ideation, the ideation, we're not even looking into the market yet. We're just trying to build something cool. It's the family culture, it's a clan culture. We're doing it together. We don't care about titles and responsibilities, all that. We're just trying to come up with something cool. At some point, we want to test it towards the market, see if it's responding to it. We're still working with full flexibility. So every time we get an input from the market, we're adjusting a bit, going back to market testing, adjusting again a bit, and all these things. And then once we have the product market fit, seeing now the concept and the market fit is there, then it's time to scale it. And then it's about doing things fast. It's about competing. It's about getting out there faster than the competitors and selling it basically, right? If you look at what is kind of good culture and leadership and ideation compared to at the scaling phase, it's more or less opposite. And that shift is really hard to make. And something that you need to pay attention to, and also I think have a good communication with around the team, how performance changes over time, or how good performance changes over time. That was it for me.
Thank you, Frederick, for your presentation. I'm going to shift to you, Travis. If you can please share your screen, and everyone just type in questions and we'll take them as soon as we open for the Q&A.
Great. Hello, everyone. Let me get my tech sorted out here right quick, and then we will get to it. Just a moment. This is my first time using Zoom on this new laptop, and I have to give it permission. Of course, that's the thing you want to do right in the middle of a talk. Let me go on camera off for like 90 seconds, get this sorted, guys, and then I'll pop right back on. Apologies.
All right, in the meantime, maybe felt like we can take one of the questions with you while Travis gets ready for his presentation. If you can switch your camera back on.
I'm sitting here speaking and it's muted, sorry. Let's see if I can get.
No worries, just when Travis, while he gets ready, let's take one of the questions for you.
Yeah.
First one, felt like, don't you think that reaching more candidates through outreach for a single hire would damage your employee brand and increase your recruitment team's workload? For sure. And I didn't go into the kind of how to do the outreach part, but that's, and I hope that Travis also look into a bit, but it's definitely one of the areas to focus on. I would. There's people are being kind of spammed. Attractive scale-up talent right now is being spammed with all kind of requests, and most of them isn't that relevant to the candidates. So once you start turning up the notch of reaching out to more candidates, you will also reach out to more that isn't relevant for you.
and thereby basically damage your brand, because they'll also feel that it's a waste of time. So you really need to qualify these things, and there's no doubt that the work-life load will increase. It's also one of the areas where when you work with external consultants, make sure that you have a good relationship, make sure that they understand the position and your brand in a good way, because they can also harm your brand if you're just doing the spray and pray from an outreach perspective. So I definitely agree, and I don't see it as the best solution, but it can be the solution to go about for short-term performance. Another ways of doing it, and other ways it can also be back at if you can engage your leaders more in the outreach part. So if you're not succeeding with the outreach from the talent acquisition part, it could be interesting to involve your CEO in the outreach, or the developer that need you want for the team and these things. So there's also other ways to think about it, but I totally agree. It's a good point.
And let's take one from the Q&A, saying that our biggest challenge is finding talent that is willing to take the risk that go along with working in a startup. As a recruiter for a young startup, I find that people perceive us as a too high of a risk as a workplace. Do you have any input for this?
No, only that it is absolutely key to assess these things, and it's one of the areas where there is something when you're working startup and scale up, where the talent pool and the talent perspective can also be a bit limited from time to time, because you tend to look for people that has been part of the scale up or startup journey, so they are willing to take the risk, and they also know the ways of working, because it is quite different from what you see in corporate. So it's I think it's good if the person has a good view that the candidate isn't feeling good about the risk, because then it's not going to be a good hire. So I think that is really something to take into consideration and assess for. And basically, of course, you can try to de-risk in many ways, but it is part of the nature of a startup that there's some risk in it.
Okay, cool. Travis, how is everything looking?
We're in business. Sorry about that, y'all. I am sharing my screen and we will hop right to it. Okay, hello. Quick check, audio, video, it's all good? Perfect. Hi, y'all. I am Travis. I oversee the TA function here at Lunar. I am super pumped to chat with you all today. I'm not going to read through this slide. I'll sort of save you guys the time, but this is me. I am a US expat living down here in Legoland in Billund for the past year, and I have recently joined Lunar as the head of TA, and I thought it might be good, in fact, to just briefly touch on my context, i.e., what is Lunar, what's our sort of current stage and scale and all of that, knowing that, also my background pre-Lunar is a bit all over the place. As I mentioned here in my slide, I've done the 10 people around a table trying to get funding thing, and I've also done the 500+ person, let's get ready for IPO acquisition thing, and at a few different industries. And so hopefully I can share some insights learned along the way with y'all. Let's just quickly touch on Lunar, and then I think we will continue from there. So Lunar, our mission is money engagement for work and life. We have an aspiration to be something of a category creator for money. The way folks kind of think about their money, the way businesses transact, the way individuals sort of take care of personal decisions, work decisions. There is so much opportunity in the money space, especially when you think about the fact that presently we are in something of a financial revolution. If you think about how folks took care of their finances, business transactions, investments, if you wound the clocks back a decade, it's night and day. There are things now that are in existence that will massively change the way people think about their money, and we as a company are staying at the forefront of that and have an aspiration to continue. And so just to ground us in logistics, this slide is already out of date, which is, I think, a testament to how quickly we are growing. I believe this is from January, but we entered into 2022 a company of 500+ employees. I think now we might actually already be at 600, and so it's really taken off. And a lot of that employee growth actually came last year. We doubled in size in a single year, and it's been pretty wild, and I wasn't even here for it, so I'm just kind of absorbing in my first month how wild it has been and how wild it is still continuing. And so, I would be remiss to not say, as a talent leader, we are still hiring. And so talk to me. I'm looking for strong TA folks, especially in Copenhagen right now. You know where to find me. So this is us. As I mentioned, I am working remotely down here in Billund. I'm in the Aarhus office every few days a week. If I'm not up there, I'm probably at our Copenhagen office, Stockholm, Oslo. So come and say hi, and looking forward to talking more about talent. So enough about us, let's get to you all. The topic of this talk is really focused on the moment that some of you all might be experiencing right now. Some of you all might be sort of getting ready to experience in the coming months or year. And some of you all may have experienced this years back, and you're just sort of tuning in to sort of hear how I'm thinking about it. So in my view, there are really three things that you need to focus on when you're getting ready to raise your Series A, or when you're sort of in that general moment, whether it's kind of getting ready in it post Series A. There's three things you got to get right. It's hiring leaders, building for scale, and equipping yourself and your team to compete for more talent. And so a quick disclaimer on all of this is that, look, everyone's context is different. Some things I'll share here might make sense for where you're at right now. Some things might make sense later. What I will say is I'm pulling from personal experience working, with founders, with teams, pulling from a lot of experience, making a lot of mistakes along the way that hopefully I can save some of you from making yourselves. And at the end of the day, all of this should be thought of as a conversation starter that we can take into the Q&A and take into the LinkedIn messages and future meetups and all of that. And so you'll know where to find me. But let's get to it. First things first, just what I'm going to do here in 3 slides is share just 5 pieces of advice for those 3 sections I laid out. And like I said, take what works, leave the rest. Context is different, et cetera, but let's get to it. And then I'm looking forward to talking more on the other end. Just as a quick note, I'm not watching the chat, but certainly we'll have time to do Q&A. Okay, so you're hiring leaders. Let me first just sort of ground us in the profile of people you're going after. I'm not going to get super functional, but the likely story is anyone you're going after to be a leader at your company in any function, they're probably quite happy where they are, in fact, and you need to sell on vision. So be sure to have one. And what I mean by this is not necessarily the sort of, stuff you put on the VC pitch deck about the company, but actually a vision for the role. If I am being reached out to come lead a function at a company, I'm going to want to know, what is this role going to look like in year 1, year 2, beyond, right? I'm going to want to know exactly how I will grow, how I'll have an impact. And so zoom down from that company vision and get really specific about the role. As you're going to leaders, make sure they can sort of see themselves going through that journey with you. That's actually, funny enough, or sadly enough, depending how you look at it, just doing that alone will probably separate you from like 90% of your competition. Actually being able to have a clear vision for the role of the leader over the next, let's call it 18 months to 3 years. Next, remember you are dealing with grownups. Leaders, they already know that you've got the fun, sort of office environment and the shuffleboard and the Friday socials and the cold brew on tap and all of that. What they want to know is, what's the financial health of your company? What's your runway? What's your burn rate? What sort of mess am I stepping into? Let's be adults about this. And there's no need to like fool each other. Give me all the mess. And also, look, tell me a little bit about, realistically, what can I expect in way of work-life balance, right? I might have families, I might have other commitments. Of course, if I'm even talking to you as a leader, I'm already aware that certainly this is not going to be your typical 9 to 5. I get that, startups are wild, but let me know sort of things like, how many parents are on the team already? And, what is your sort of culture around flexible schedules and should I be expecting to respond to Slacks at like 7 o'clock at night and that kind of stuff. When you're dealing with grownups, they've got grown-up things they care about. And so make sure you're targeting your messaging and your conversations thusly. Next, leverage headhunters to get the first meeting. Super duper practical. Like if I'm in your shoes, I am going to spend a few hours on my own as a founder, as the first head of people, whomever, curating a list of my top people I would love to see in the role in question, whether it's, head of product, head of marketing. I, as the leader in the company, I'm going to make my list. I'm then going to go to a headhunter and say, right, all I want you to do is get me meetings. I'm not going to outsource my entire recruiting to you. I am going to incentivize you to open the door, bring this person to the table. I will take it from there. Again, that might be a controversial stance on this, but I think at this stage, this is not the time to let someone else run your entire end-to-end process and do the, I'll be honest, sometimes smarmy recruiting thing that headhunters can do. No offense to anyone, but it is a thing in the industry. You do not want to, you don't want to give control away on something so critical as hiring leads to your company. But at the same time, just to balance that, there is massive, massive value in having a strong partner who can get you those meetings on the books. And I would devote time to finding a really strong partner. And I'm happy to even answer questions later about how to sort of assess headhunters and external recruiters. Be radically candid and realistic with yourself and candidates. What I mean by this is going back to the thing about dealing with grownups, be very, very honest about what is in scope and what is out of scope for the role that you're speaking about. Be extremely honest about what kinds of support and budget and resources, et cetera, the person's going to have to work with in, say, the first 6 to 9 months, and what they don't have, right? There's nothing worse than devoting so much time to hiring a really great leader, and then on the back end, when they start having, all kinds of arguments and disagreements and just kind of misalignment on just the nuts and bolts of the role. So really be candid, and be realistic with yourself too, right? You may not be able to get the, like COO of Facebook to come join your company, right? And the time and effort spent doing that is going to be at the expense of other actions you could take, right? And so be realistic, be candid. It pays no dividends to hide the ball at this stage with senior candidates. And then lastly, once they're in the door, there's a balance to strike. You don't want to micromanage, but you don't want to abdicate. I think this goes back to that alignment piece, right? When you hire a leader, focus obsessively on getting that leader really off to the races in their first 90 days. And that might mean that you're staying a lot closer to them than you think they want you to, or a lot closer to them than you think you should. The thing you want to strike a balance on is, I am here to support you, the leader, to really own. I'm not going to just drop you and walk away. Getting that balance right is really important. And it's important in the recruiting process with leaders to talk about how you're going to show up with them in those first 90 days, so it's not a surprise. So again, don't micromanage, don't abdicate. That's leadership. Next, now is the time to begin building for scale. Yes, now. The best time to plant a tree was 20 years ago. Don't take it from me as a TA guy. Just ask any founder that's at Series C or beyond. They will almost all tell you, yes, we should have brought our people person in a year ago, 2 years ago, what have you. Let's go ahead and bring that person in now. And I agree, as Frederick said earlier, it's one of the most important hires that you can make. Don't take it from me and Frederick, because we're people. Ask your founder friends. I bet you all the money in my bank account, they're all going to agree with us, save for maybe 1%. So what I'll say is, find your first people person and keep your external recruiters and other sort of external supports. And you'll notice I have an asterisk here. Again, everyone's context is different. In my experience, you don't bring on that first people person just to do all of your recruiting, right? You bring them on to begin to build the ground game, to begin to establish your employer brand, to begin to establish systems. That takes time. right? And you want to keep the ball, or you want to keep the lights on, so to speak, on hiring. And so, yes, you might for a time actually want to keep some semblance of external headhunters, recruiters turned on. And the asterisk here is context. You know, it's going to be up to you to decide kind of the when and the where and the how. But what I would caution anyone against is this mindset of, once I have my people person, my TA person, every single other external recruiter is turned off. It's just not the case. I think you have to begin to build, and those external resources can in fact be quite helpful, to allowing your people person, your TA person, to do the proper building. And look, maybe a controversial statement, bring on someone who's done it before and do not compromise. There is something very, very unique about being the first people person at a startup. And in my experience, and again, maybe controversial, if you are coming, from the large corporates, and even if you have the best pedigree in the world, you're going to have some troubles here. Equally, if you are coming, let's say, for instance, from the agency world, and it's your first time moving into house, you're going to have different kind of troubles. And I can go on, I could do a whole different presentation on kind of the sort of personas and archetypes, and maybe someday I will, but happy to chat more. The big point here is bring someone who has actually been to the dance before, because they're going to know the moves to step. And look, have them actually put things in place, but being realistic, this is not the time to kill an ant with a bazooka, right? Turn on ATS. There's a lot on the market. They're all kind of about the same. I'll be honest with you. We use Team Tailor. I love it. I've used Greenhouse in the past. There's a lot of great stuff out there. Turn one on. It's going to save you a lot of headache. Have your TA, people person, put together a very basic, lightweight hiring framework, A through Z, what's our competencies, all that kind of stuff, what's our sort of hiring rubric, and train interviewers to interview well using that framework. There's no sense in building the systems and then not training people on how to use them. And you'd be surprised how often companies get that wrong. And so train your interviewers, train your hiring managers. And then lastly, on the scale piece, absolutely obsess over onboarding, right? Similar to when you think about things from like a product and sales perspective, if you're spending so much time and effort acquiring customers, you're not just going to leave the onboarding period of that customer acquisition to chance. And so why would you ever do that for the people you bring on? Get crazy about onboarding, make sure that everyone on the team, people, marketing, whomever, make sure that they know that that first month, that's when you sort of keep people for life or lose them forever, right? Let's not fumble over the yard line once you get into the end zone kind of thing. And then from there, look, we're moving to the bigger leagues now, right? And so competition will begin to get more fierce. And I know that one of the big questions, people always ask is like, oh, how do I compete with big tech? How do I poach those people from, the Amazons and, the Googles of the world? I'll be honest, and maybe it's a controversial statement. The best way to compete is to actually ignore the noise to a degree, right? Google is going to do what Google's going to do. Like Facebook's going to do what Facebook's going to do. You need to build your brand, not somebody else's. And I won't go too much on this because Frederick did a great job sort of talking about this in his chat, but get a lot more serious about your own USP and your own sort of go-to-market strategy for your employer brand than just sort of, following along what big tech is doing or what your competitors are doing. Doesn't mean you sort of ignore them forever. Definitely keep an eye on things, but don't get so obsessed about what is happening down the street so much that you don't take care of your own lawn, right? And so build the brand, not someone else's. And if you're going to compete, really think of this from a team lens, right? If I'm building a team in, say, basketball or handball or whatever, I'm going to make sure that everyone on that team is really, really great at their position. And I'm going to make sure that in our context, that every single person in my company, they know the pitch and they know to generate referrals. In fact, at a previous startup of mine, our COO would routinely do like pop quizzes in the elevator and like at the water cooler, ask people like, yeah, so, tell me about our company. And, if you've got a referral, what do you do with them? Like, do you know who to go to on TA? Do you know the process? having that culture of making sure literally everyone knows the pitch and can generate referrals is really a game changer, because it's one thing to say, oh, we have a referral program, oh, you should pitch the company, but as the leader, sort of holding people accountable to knowing how to do it well is really next level kind of stuff. Next, put employer brand on your people team and marketing teams OKRs. One of the things that I think you want to prevent here is you want to prevent a situation where both marketing and people think the other team is responsible for employer brand. You have to have shared ownership, and putting it sort of within the goal setting for both teams forces that collaboration and keeps it top of mind. And so I would make sure to, however you do your goal setting, make sure embedded in there, whether it's OKRs, SMART goals, what have you, make sure it's embedded in there that these two teams are jointly responsible for employer brand. And there are, KPIs, et cetera, that are going to be associated with that based on your context. And speaking of KPIs, hold the TA team's feet to the fire a little bit. You should not be too sort of coy on this. Like, I would set up KPIs. How many people have applied through passive candidate outreach in the last 30 days, right? Per function. Implement some kind of candidate experience measure via surveys, whatever, to sort of know, as the leader, you want to know how many people are coming in and how are they doing in the process, right? That kind of stuff, honestly, is the brand builder or brand killer, much more so than splashy graphics on LinkedIn, that kind of stuff. Make sure your TA team is getting after it and going out there, and make sure that you're giving people a great experience. And then lastly, get your leaders on the circuit, right? Not everyone's comfortable with it. And so, definitely help them get comfortable, give them, some kind of training, what have you. But if you're a leader at the company, in any function, like, you should be doing what I'm doing right now, right? You should be out there, you should be out there sort of talking to your industry peers and building that brand for the company, right? And so panels, podcasts, blog posts, what have you, there is always a way for someone to contribute to the brand. And so again, these were my ideas, 5 just kind of pieces of advice across these 3 domains, and that will do it for me. And I'm excited for Q&A.
Thank you, Travis. Yeah, so we're quite tight on time, so let's just jump right to it. Frederick, if you'll also join, cool. I'm just going to take it from the top. Diversity is a very important issue, but how do you actually reach the relevant people outside your own network? Maybe Frederick, you want to go first for that one? Yeah.
And I'm not sure how to answer it, except kind of the obvious, that you can do outreach outside of your network and get in touch with people. But I think it's of course, it's always a hard one to crack, the first one, getting out of really stapling the diversity. I think it's important to communicate that you want it and show an openness towards it for the market. You can do that in many ways. And as soon as because that's kind of what we experienced at Neue as well. Once we kind of got into it, we saw a way more diverse pool of candidates being attracted by us all of a sudden. But you really need to tell the story, need to tell that you want it, and hopefully also get people on board that have diversity in several ways, because that is a way of showing an openness. But I mean, the outreach is, there's, of course, if it's international talents, there's international channels to do job posting ads, and there's, of course, a direct outreach to people that are in different markets or whatever you might be looking for. I don't know if that answered, but yeah.
May I add something? In fact,
yeah, of course.
I think there's that old kind of business quote of, you can't manage what you don't measure. I would also do everything Frederick just mentioned, and on top of that, continually do sort of retros on pass-through rates through the funnel, through the lens of diversity, right? What I mean by that is looking at, let's say, a sample of your engineering hiring over the past quarter, looking at, okay, yes, how many people came through the funnel, but were there disparate pass-through rates from, say, screen to interview to offer? along lines of race, gender, etc. That reveals some really interesting fodder for conversations and improvements.
But it's also a bit of a hard part to measure some of it, right? Of course, gender and stuff like that, but how about religion or sexuality?
Yeah.
It can easily become a bit tricky what you measure on these things and how you kind of go about getting the data points, because
I agree. It's kind of like measure what can be measured and use that as like building the muscle to ask those kind of questions and be thinking those kind of ways, certainly. But yeah, you're right. You're not going to get every single lot, every single sort of cross section of identity for sure.
So we touched upon a little bit about the whole diluting culture. So a question, it was actually for you, Frederick, but maybe Travis, you can take this one first. Do you think it's possible to keep the same core values as you shift priorities, going from the scrappy sort of startup ground to the structured approach? Maybe you can give an insight to that.
I think the answer is somewhat dependent on the values that you sort of signed up for in the beginning. And if they're overly rigid and kind of specific to like having 20 people around a table, then those don't scale, right? And so I think as you're going through Series A, Series B, it's always a good exercise to sort of look at your operating principles, your core values, what have you, and sort of ask yourself the question of, do these actually still work for us at 50 plus people, 200 plus people? But yeah, it's a tough question to answer in the abstract without sort of interrogating the values and principles sort of on their face from the outset. But I think the interrogation of them ongoing is perhaps the point I'm making.
Yeah.
I just want to, I totally agree. And I would also assess them along the way and look into them. But if they still are the right ones to you, I would argue that most of them would be able to go through the scaling phase. And it's always a matter of making sure that you then scale it the right way, because values become true when they're meeting resistance. So when you're being challenged on them, that's where you need to live up to them. And it's when you need to take some sacrifice that can be hard on the short-term business and these things, or can be costly or whatever, but that's where they become true. So actually it's when they're meeting the resistance that they can either become true or just something on a paper. But it's challenging, and for once, transparency is always such a thing you want to have, but it becomes harder and harder to be transparent when you are more and more, because you just drown people in communication. So how are you transparent when you're 100 compared to 12? But there are ways of being it, but you yeah.
Okay, so let's just take one of this. This question is very specific about the whole tech recruitment agencies. One thing is to find the right one, of course, to identify that one, but also want to ask, should we look outside of DK if we're a Danish-based startup, but a global reach? Like how early on do you think global in that sense? Travis, do you want to take this one?
Yeah. So presuming that global reach means you are hiring engineers literally anywhere in the world, it would only stand to reason that yes, you then would want to find recruiters anywhere in the world and agencies, right? And so, for me, in my last company, I would routinely look to various parts of Europe to find great agencies. Similarly, when I was in US, Africa, go where the talent is, and know that if you don't have the local experience, find someone who does. On this call, I'm not going to go through like exact recommendations, certainly, but happy to sort of talk shop offline on it. But yeah, I think if you've got the global reach, if you're hiring in other markets, find recruiters in those markets for sure.
And let's go maybe a little bit more over to the negative experience that can have a ripple effect over in the Q&A. Over onboarding can send a negative signal to top talents. So let's talk about, how do you focus on keeping motivation to newly hired employees 6 to 12 months later ahead? And that's actually starting with you, Travis, going from Lunar.
Well, what is over onboarding? I guess it would be good for me to understand that a little bit. I don't think I'm fully understanding the question. Is it sort of like the very pedantic, let's put you through an 80 courses and trainings and all this kind of stuff, perhaps? I'll assume that's what it is. So for me, I think onboarding should be tailored to the role and the person. And you should seek to centralize and automate every single piece of it, except for the pieces that have an actual sort of like human connection value, right? And so as a first principle, like automate what can be automated, centralize what can, and then ask yourself the question of, is this thing going to add kind of human relational value? Let's do it in person. Let's kind of make it a meeting or whatever. If it's not, like systematize that puppy and move it even to maybe even the pre-onboarding phase, that fun time between like offer letter sign and day one. Because yeah, you don't want to leave people in these kind of like pedantic onboarding meetings forever. It's really about getting them, connected to the right people, clarifying their job, and then giving them what they need to succeed, and just hitting go from there.
Okay, so we're actually run out of time, but I'm sure that you guys maybe want to help with get the final questions, and we'll get it in the upfollowing email. So thank you, Frederick, and thank you, Travis, and thank you everyone for joining in, and have a nice day. Hopefully we'll see you to the next Startup Talk.
Yeah, sounds fun.
Bye.
Thanks.